So welcome everybody. I'm Karena. Hey, how are you? Good. I'm glad to see you. Um, so today we're going to talk about selling your home as is, or whether you should make improvements, what to do and not do. And I'm officially, there you go, Karena Stipp, Senior Specialist Realtor. And this is what I live, breathe every single day. So I'm going to talk about, in fact, Ron and I were talking about this right before we got started today. What is the market like, right? This is a kind of a common question that you get from, as a realtor, from people. And this is probably an eye chart if you're sitting back, but you can probably see that there's net minuses and pluses here. Can you all see that? So, yeah, so you see that there's quite a few minuses. And this is year to date. This is November, which was the most recent I could pull from the MLS. They hadn't compiled December yet. So year to date, pretty much sales are down, and not huge, almost 2%, 6.3% that we're seeing some numbers. So both sales are down a little bit, and the sale price is down a little bit. Now, where you see the pluses, this is with days on market. So things are staying on the market longer right now, and they're selling for a little bit less. So what that tells us is buyers have more negotiating power. And we're going to talk about that because that directly relates to selling as is, okay? And then it also, the other plus here is for housing affordability. So as prices go down, obviously it's more affordable for buyers, so that, it makes sense that that's what that number is going to be, okay?
So what's the price differential in, year over date, what's the percentage decline in prices?
So this is median sale price through November was 500,000, year to date 496, and it's 0.7%. So it's not a lot, and it's actually selling percent of list price. It's selling at like 97% of list price. So if you're priced properly, then it's selling at 97% of that across the board. And by the way, these are Wake Forest numbers. I specifically pulled Wake Forest over like Raleigh or, so this is just, if you're outside of, it's not going to be too different, but that's specifically Wake Forest numbers. Okay?
So the sales prices have only decreased by about 2%.
Yeah, and it is a mixed bag. So, and Ron and I were talking about this, but so a couple of examples. I had a house that closed in October that I listed in September. It took about 5 days to go under contract, but that's because I was kind of massaging all of the potential offerers and saying, well, give me just another day. And so we had multiple offers, but it took about 5 days to go under contract. And that listed at 425. So, and it had an acre and a half just outside of town here. I had another one, went under contract in November, closed right before Christmas. It was multiple offers, went under contract in 12 hours, but it sold for $375. So if they're in kind of that range, the more affordable range, right? That kind of range, they're selling still fairly quickly in some cases. Also has to do with location. And then if you see, the one that we had an acre and a half, that doesn't always come up. That one they built from scratch, so they'd been there since 94. And so some of those kinds of things are coming into play. I will say, as a general rule of thumb, the prettier it is, the more perfect it is, the more turnkey it is, the faster it will sell. Okay. Now that said, the one that I mentioned with the acre and a half, that one was dated. They'd never done anything from 94 as far as the original kitchen, bathrooms. Now, the roof was new, pretty new. They'd replaced all of the windows. The hardwoods were in like brand new shape. The carpet looked pretty good. I think it was original. We had it cleaned, had it painted throughout, so it was fresh. But there were things that people were going to do. They'd added a garage. It didn't originally have a garage, and then there was a workshop with it. The whole deck had been redone. So there were a lot of things that, big ticket items. HVAC was new. So when buyers are looking, they go, oh, it needs a roof, it needs an HVAC, it needs a water heater. Oh my gosh, I'm going to have to come in here and dump, how many tens of thousands into this thing just to get it up and running pretty quickly. And so that's part of what you have, people are looking at. If you've got the systems in good place, and we'll talk about that, but if you've got systems in good place, then they're like, oh, good. So all I'd have to do is, basically a little makeup and pretty stuff, right? Yeah. So, and some people are in for that and some are not. So, selling as is, North Carolina, a lot of people don't realize this, it is considered an as is state. That's in the contract. Okay? So, people will say to me, now I want to sell my house as is, I don't want to have to do anything. I'm like, okay, so let's talk about that. So, really, it's as is anyway. Now, does that mean if you specify, because I've specified before with listings that it is an as is sale, meaning that the sellers are not willing to do anything, does that mean that the buyers can't come back and say, we need X, Y, and Z to fix all these things that we found in the inspections? No, they can still ask. And it could still be another negotiation. Now, I've gone back before and said, seller said from the beginning it was as is. So the answer is no. Well, there's a lot of factors that come into that. There's some down payments, right? And depending on how low those are, if it's a big, big ticket item that they found, let's say we think the HVAC's fine, and then they find that it's really not, and you've listed it as is, and they've put a very small amount down, well, they may walk if they have to replace that. So those are things to consider. So there's really two negotiation periods when you're selling your house in North Carolina. There's the first one when you go under contract, and then the second one after the inspections have been done, when the buyer comes back and says, here's my inspection findings, here's what I would like. And it may be money, it may be things fixed, it may be a combination of those things. And so then you have that conversation with your agent to say, okay, so what are we going to do or not do? Now, I had one this summer, it was in Heritage, and the buyer came back with a $15,000 ask. This house was in good shape. We whittled that down to $1,200 is what the sellers ended up giving. And that was because they got their handyman to do things. Really, the estimates that this buyer had were from somebody who was gouging her, who was just hoping for a money grab. And that's what happens. Well, it's still your house while it's your house. So then you can say, I'm going to do this. In fact, these sellers, we didn't even inform them. We just did it. And then I came back and said, here's what they're going to offer. And here's what's been fixed. And we have pictures and we have proof. Take it or leave it. And she took it. So you still get to be in the driver's seat. And so some people if I have a big ask like that, when I call the seller back and I say, okay, so the buyers come back with their ask, just take a deep breath because we're going to talk through this. Because $15,000 feels like, oh my gosh, that's horrible. What are they thinking? Our house is in good shape. And so that's where we go, okay, we're going to address this, one thing after the other. We're just going to do this, 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 this. And then you do what makes sense. So they can inspect. You may choose to or not to, and that's part of that negotiation. So what to improve and what not to improve. And I know, especially with seniors, some of you have some runway, meaning you have some time before you may make a move. You're still just thinking about, this might be 5 years down the road. It might be a year down the road. It might be, I'm not even sure. I just need to make a backup plan, and maybe we'll move into senior living at some point if we have a health crisis, but for now we're fine. So what do you do? Well, don't spend a ton of money if you're moving out. I just had a question from a lady yesterday. So it was a referral that came in. I'm talking to the person who's referred it, and she said, this lady's considering putting in a sprinkler system in her backyard. It's $18,000 is the quote. And I said, and she has dementia and she's moving in the next 6 months? No. The answer is no. Don't do it. Okay. You're never going to get the money back out of that. Now, if she was going to stay for the next 5 years and she wants to enjoy her flowers and doesn't want them to die, and she's getting to the point where she might fall over and she's got the money to spend, well, that's a different conversation. So everything is on a case-by-case basis, and some things pay back better than others. So if you've lived in a house for 30 years and it hasn't been painted in most of that time, fresh paint is 100% ROI, return on investment. Now, when I talk to people who are moving out, and they say, what are your recommendations? What should we do? Paint is kind of a good, really good one. Neutral paint, especially if you don't have neutral paint in some areas. I had a lady refuse to paint a red living room recently. Her house was on the market 6 months. She would not do it. And she had red tile in a room. Very specific taste. We had that discussion. She was prepared for it, and it cost her. So, you can have those conversations. People dig in. Okay, that's your choice. Just know that it may take longer to sell, and it may sell for less. So fresh paint, 100%. A flooring refresh, depending on where you are. So either fresh carpet, or if you need to have, I know the hardwoods, if you have the hardwoods redone, that can be expensive. It can be, everything has to move out, all of that. It's messy. So, those are kind of conversations that you can have, whether that's going to pay off. Look at these two big ones, though. Front door update, 188% ROI. I've seen some that it's up to 300%. And garage door is the other big one, and that's 200 to 300. I'm just rough loosely. So if either one of those are A, kind of plain, or B, kind of ugly or looking a little dated, or the paint bubbles. I had a door that the paint bubbled. I'd sand it dutifully, and then I'd paint it again. I asked all these questions at the paint store. Never, it would bubble. Inevitably, it would bubble. Drove me crazy. Replaced the door that year, Halloween. All my neighbors come up with their kids. Oh, love your door. Just, it's curb appeal, right? So, within reason, take a look at those things. How much would it be to replace or update? And again, how long are you going to be there? Lighting and fixture updates. So if you've got the burnished brass or the shiny brass, especially, those really start to look dated. Builder grade lights. And again, builder grade may be just fine depending on your price point. But I always call lighting the jewelry of the home. If you've ever been in a house that has really cool lighting, don't you notice it? Right? It's sparkly, it's pretty. There's a reason for that. So that, within reason, again, this can be something that really draws the eye and brings people in. And it doesn't have to cost a ton, depending on what kind of updates you're making. A minor kitchen refresh. Now, the kitchen can be one of those things. Again, this is taste specific. So what kind of decisions are you making? Are they neutral enough to fit into someone else's life? Okay, so 80 to 90% ROI on kitchen. Baths are kind of right in there. And you could do new hardware in your kitchen on all the doors. So think about, yeah.
I've always heard about that, and I just didn't figure out why that's a big difference in that sometimes the hardware is very, very expensive.
It can be, yeah.
And can people really get 80 or 90% on it?
Well, it can change a look. So, and there are programs where you can, how you can change your hairstyle on an AI program nowadays? Yeah, so you could do the same thing with your kitchen, upload it and try out different, hardware. You can get some that is kind of a builder pack where it's not quite as expensive. It's fairly generic. Yeah.
You look in the hardware store, you get 5 and it's expensive, and then you start adding up. In the kitchen, you could have, I don't know how many.
Yeah.
A lot.
I think anything that looks kind of, especially like 90s, let's say, so the brass, so that fake brass, right? That's one thing that, it's immediate. It draws the eye. Now, I'm not saying that you should put in, there's a new gold color that's a burnished, not the darker, but it's just a gold that's a matte gold in fixtures. I think that will be out in the next, short period of time.
So what's
neutral enough?
Universal and classic.
Yeah, I think you're seeing black cabinets. So you could do black. You could do like a silver of some kind. Silver seems to stay in vogue pretty well. And think about, what does your faucet look like? Are you going to change out the faucet? Does it look new enough? And do the handles go with that? What does the lighting look like? Because you change one thing, and then what does it make everything else in the room look like? Right? Yeah. So, study some of that online. You could go to a kitchen decor just to ask questions. Doesn't mean you have to buy anything there, and kind of figure out what the in vogue thing is, and can you find it somewhere else for less? that looks similar. It's kind of like the knockoff of the leather coat that's $5,000 from Prada, and you get the TJ Maxx version that looks pretty good. Think about that, and think about the price point of your home. Does that fit? Right? Because if you put in, $10,000. I still remember I was 25, bought my first house. We went on a trip to Italy right before it closed, and this guy's trying to sell me a Murano glass la-di-da, and I'm like, it's a split level in Hannibal, Missouri. Like, who does no? Some Italian guy with all this suave charm, and he's trying to sell me this $5,000 Murano glass chandelier, and I'm like, yeah, doesn't go, buddy, doesn't go. So, think those things through if it's going to go with the aesthetics. All right. Bathroom touch-ups. I mean, even something as simple as recaulking, it can look like the caulk gets a little cracked, and that can look a little tired. That's a super easy, super inexpensive thing to do. You can change out the mirrors and fixtures. Moderate to high ROI. This can make it look a lot more updated. So think about those things without having to tear out the whole and gut the whole kitchen or the whole bathroom. My neighbor just put a new vanity in. His vanity was quite old, and it was real low. You know how the old vanities were real low? So he's got a modern vanity that he put in, and it changed the look of the bathroom quite a bit. Would I have done some other things in there? Probably, but they'd already done a whole gut of another bathroom, and they were tired, and they decided that the new vanity was enough. Well, it will make a difference, down the road if he ever decides to sell that. It will make a difference to have the new vanity in there, and then you have fewer things to change. So landscaping, again, this comes to curb appeal, right? So 70 to 100%, mulch, trimmed shrubs, fresh flowers, depending on what the season is. I have one that's going on the market in a couple of weeks, and she'd been a caregiver long-time caregiver for a family member, and it just simply, she was tired. And I said, I've got someone for that. Do you want me to give you his number? Yes, please. And I just was there and put a lockbox on it the other day so we can get the cleaner in. Looks fantastic. He did a great job. Cost her, a few $100s, and it's all trimmed up. I mean, even when I walked on the sidewalk to go up to the house when I met her the first day, it's all kind of growing over, And I get it. Like, life happened, and she took care of what she needed to take care of, and she didn't care about the shrubs. I don't blame her. I probably would have done the same thing. Sometimes this does not cooperate. There we go. So what are buyers looking for? Good bones. So location, what your lot looks like, where it's located, what does the house look like, is it in good shape? Is this something someone could come in and they could put their own stamp on it and make it their own home? Okay, so that's one of the things they're looking for. Well-maintained systems. These are the big ticket items. One of the first things I'm going to ask someone before I come meet with them, if they want, well, can you come out and look at the house and tell me what it's worth? I'm going to ask you some questions before I do my homework, and part of what I'm going to ask you is, what age is the roof? What age is the HVAC? How old is your hot water heater? And then I'm going to ask you if you've done any updates, and what do those look like? And then I'm going to do my homework and pull the comps so that we can take a look at that for your neighborhood. And sometimes I'll do that homework. I come look at it, and I say, okay, well, we're going to adjust according to what I've seen in the house, because I'm doing that blind, even if I've asked you questions. So you can adjust those numbers. And then I always tell people, if I've met with you now and you don't list the house until June or even until March, let's say, I'm going to pull those numbers again right before you go on the market, because the market could change, or we could have a new comp that comes in that lowers or makes the price a little higher. And so I always call it a placeholder number when I give you, so, okay, the value's around this, but it could change a little bit in the next 3 months, 6 months, whatever. I mean, the whole world could fall apart. Venezuela could be attacked. We don't know, right? There's a lot of things that could happen right now. Yeah.
Do you consider a house 20 years old an old house? Or, like the cabinets are still seem like they be in style and that type of thing?
Well, and that's really a subjective question. Like, does your buyer consider that? So some would consider that an older house because there are a lot of newer things that have come out. So you might have granite, somebody might prefer quartz. right? Or you could have corian counters, which were nice 20 years ago, but now it's granite, right? Or quartz. So it's subjective. And then what kind of shape is it in? Because one person could live in a house for 20 years and it's pristine, and another person, dogs, cats, kids, whatever, and it's looking a little worse for the wear. So it's both how dated is it and what's the condition of the house.
I mean, I just think about if you put new carpet in, a lot of people would like to have their own choice.
Yeah.
And like my house would need to be painted, but then if I take off all the pictures and that, and you put them back up, it's still a thing where people will have to touch up or.
Right. Okay. So a couple things there. So the carpet, again, that can be dependent on what your situation is. So I'm working with a lady whose husband he had Alzheimer's, and he spent a lot of time in one room, and the carpet was horrible. So there was no cleaning it. So, and it didn't touch any other carpet because it was hardwood that went up to it. So she replaced that one room of carpet, but she had carpet going up the stairs and in the bonus that was really okay. So we had it cleaned. And it's a neutral enough carpet that's okay. So I think in her case that made the most sense. But it may make sense, like the one in Heritage I mentioned that we had the $15,000 ask. That one, they made the decision to clean the carpet, which was really in pretty good condition anyway. I mean, it was original to the house, but it was just two people and they were clean. And so they just had it cleaned. And the buyer made the comment to me, because I saw her at an open house. She said, I would have made the same decision, because the hardwood was throughout all the main living area and really was that original hardwood color that's kind of that blondie orange, right? The natural color. A lot of people like the pecan or the walnut now. So this lady went in, she was going to add hardwood to the rooms that had carpet and then have the whole thing finished to the same new stain. So for her, it would have been a waste to put new carpet in. And so that's a conversation, I really look at each case on a case-by-case basis, but I think if it were something like that, then that's what I would recommend. Yeah.
Does carpet allowance work? Because it seems to me the best thing to do is provide an allowance. You move your stuff out, and before they move their stuff in, they can pick and choose what they want. Or psychologically, does carpet allowance not work for?
I almost prefer to price it and just make the statement, this home has been priced with updates needed updates in mind. Okay. And because otherwise they see the higher price in the listing, and then some people don't read that, even though the print's there, even if I tell somebody. So I think you're just better off to price it. Okay, I'm acknowledging the fact this is priced because I know it needs this, and this. Yeah. And then you can. And then I just had one that we peeled $10,000 off because they'd cleaned the carpet, which didn't look bad, and they'd replaced it in one room, which touched the other carpet, but all of the rest of it smelled like a dog. And so, and the buyers were willing to pay the full price because they really wanted this house. And I said, listen, I ran the numbers. I think we can get in at 10,000 under. And we did. They accepted it. And when I sent the offer to the other agent, I said, I just want you to understand that this is because the carpet smells the way it smells. And she goes, oh, we had that cleaned. And I almost think it was better before it was cleaned. It got wet. And I was like, mm-hmm. And so I knew she was going to go right back and tell the buyers or the sellers that. And so sure enough, they accepted it. I would have probably gone a little lower, but I knew that they'd paid only $5,000 less than we were offering 2 years ago. So I said, if we position it this way, that you're going to have to put in new carpet, and they get a win because now they've sold it for a little more than they paid 2 years ago, everybody's a winner. And it worked. I actually kind of thought they might come back and say, oh, well, let's go to 5,000 in between, right, and meet us in the middle. They just took it. So, the buyers I was working with were thrilled because we got a little peeled off of there, and they were willing to pay that. So, some of that's all in that discussion that happens in between. Yeah.
Could you give us an idea of a good age for the roof, the HVAC, and water heater? Do we know that we're close to having to replace it to make it look better?
Yeah, And so, so the roof, if you've got a roof that's 20 years or more, that's when buyers start to get a little, you know, a little panicky. If, and again, it can depend. Is it a single tab or is it an architectural shingle? Because architectural shingles are going to last a little longer. And they look at the, I mean, the first thing I do when I get out of a car, I'm walking it, I'm looking, and I walk all around the house and I'm pointing things out to clients. I usually get there early and I'll go inside the house, turn all the lights on if I'm showing, if I'm a buyer agent and representing the buyers, and then I walk outside the house before they even pull in the drive. Now, if we're seeing several in a row, I can't do that at every house, but I'll say, well, let's go outside and let's walk around. And then we have a discussion about, what's the longevity. If you look at like an HVAC, so I've got one that's going on the market tomorrow, and the HVAC's 2008. Been regularly serviced. She didn't want to replace it. It's still running fine. It'll be a consideration, but her roof was put on a few months ago. And she's got a tankless hot water heater that's in good shape. So she's got it's a good price point. I think that the buyers will accept that. They'll likely do not only the regular inspection, but with an older HVAC. If I were the buyer agent on that one, I would recommend that my buyers not only had a regular inspection, but an HVAC inspection as well. It's about $100. It's not much. And the reason why is the general inspector is not licensed to pull the housing off of that unit because it's 220. So the HVAC inspection, that guy's licensed for that. So he can pull that off and look inside. He knows what he's looking for. They're a generalist if you've got a general inspection. Makes sense, right? And so part of that is, from the seller perspective, if it's running right, do you really want to replace that right before you go on the market and you've had it regularly serviced? So part of the gamble is, do you just want to see if they find anything? I mean, if it's been running fine and you've had it serviced regularly, then the assumption is it'll run for the next, who knows, could be 2, 3, 4 years, right? If it's older like that. And so the buyer thinks, okay, well, I've already got a good price. Now, if they find anything, let's say that they go in and the inspector finds, what they do is they turn the heat, and it depends on the temperature outside. So certain temperatures, they can only get so much of a reading on either heat or air, depending, right? So they'll test the number, and there's also, and how quickly it changes over. So they'll kick it on. So if that number's indicating that it's not quite as efficient as it should be, that's when then they'll recommend an HVAC inspection. So then you have that as a subsequent inspection. So then the HVAC guy comes in and says, well, actually, it's, it needs a new condenser, it needs whatever. And so then that's part of that negotiation. But I had one in a condo this summer, running fine. They have the inspection. Inspector says, need to have a HVAC inspection. HVAC guy comes in and says, to fix it, $7,800. So they submit that with their ask. $7,800, you have a new unit for that. So I talked to the seller about it, and I'm like, you have a guy, right? He goes, yeah. I said, well, do you want to call him? Yeah. So his guy comes in and says $5,500. I said, I've got a guy. Would you like to call him? Yeah. So we ended up getting it for $3,250. So is that cheaper than a whole new unit? Absolutely. And it was worth it to him. And in his case, yes, it was a little older, but it was running fine. He said, I cannot believe that. It literally, after the inspector left, I noticed the air was hot. And it happens like that. I had a pool pump go out this summer, literally right after the day after we went under contract. So it happens. It's life, right? And so those are all things that you can kind of address as you go, and we can have those conversations as we work through it. But it also pays to shop around a little bit, because look at what we peeled down from 78, their ask, to 32. Yeah.
So does the hot water heater, the tank thing instead of the old one, whatever, make that big of a difference? Because I know they're pretty expensive.
Tankless?
Yeah, tankless.
Okay. If you don't have a tankless now, and it, if you're thinking of moving the next year, I would certainly not want to put one in. There's mixed, some people think it's great, and they're like, oh, that's nice, it's tankless. Personally, I would not want one unless I had a booster, because if you're at the wrong end of the house, you run the water for minutes and minutes and minutes and minutes until it gets hot enough, which I don't like personally. And now you can spend another 1,000 or 1,500, whatever it is, and you put this booster on that then allows it to be instant. But, you know, you don't need to do that to sell your house. No. If you've got a traditional tank water heater and it is running fine, you know, I would leave it alone if you're going to move in the next year. Now, if it goes out in the meantime, you know, then obviously you've got to replace that. But I certainly wouldn't invest in a tankless. Now, I mean, if you're in a, you know, $4 million house, there's certain things that at that price point versus 500,000, there's things that are expected, but you probably already have one if you're in a $4 million house, quite frankly. Yeah. What's that? Two or three, right? Yeah.
Kitchens, back to kitchens,
Yeah.
counters. In a 20-year-old house, it doesn't have quartz or.
So it's a laminate counter.
Yeah. So is it better to go ahead and replace the counters or just wait and see what the seller wants?
So the one I'm putting on the market tomorrow has laminate counters. That kitchen's it's a 1966 split in Durham. And the kitchen has cabinets that were done 8 years ago, and they just decided to put in laminate countertops. But the price point's in the 400s, so it certainly I don't think it's going to pay to put in new countertops for her. When I met her in October, we discussed it, and I said, you know, you've got 6 months runway. It doesn't make sense to put in new countertops. If somebody wants solid surface of whatever type, they'll pick out what they want when they move in. So let's leave it and price it accordingly. And there's enough other ones when I look at comps that have laminate countertops that say that you don't need to replace it. That's part of what happens in that process. When I look through comps, people go, oh, well, what do you think my house is worth? I'm not Zestimate. You know, I mean, and Zestimate doesn't know what I know when I've gone in your house, right? So a lot of people go, well, but the Zestimate was this. Yeah, it's an algorithm. It's a computer. It's not a person. And they never walked in your house, and they don't know that you put the new front door on, and they don't know that you just did the floors, and they don't know, right? They don't know those things. They know the neighborhood in general. And if you live in a cookie cutter neighborhood where 500 people have the Staffordshire and 400 people have the, you know, whatever, Wellington, then you're going to have comps in there that you can get pretty darn close on the price. But if you're in, you know, a neighborhood where there's 1970s mixture of whatever, then it's a little more fluid. And so when I'm looking for the comps, it takes me a few hours to run comps properly. I look at all of the pictures, and then I have a spreadsheet that I put it into. So this is not some number. I hate when people ask me. I mean, I know that it's human nature, but it always kind of, I'm like, it's not that simple. Like, I can give you a rough, right? But I've also lost listings because there's a guy here in town that I knew for 2 years, and he asked me, I'd been to his house, and he asked me, he said, what's it going to sell for? And I said, it's going to sell in the low 800s or high 700s. He went with another agent who listed at $850. Guess what? It sold for $795. But I didn't get paid for that. So I don't like to give a number because I need to go have that conversation with you. And if necessary, I bring my computer. I purposely have a touch screen on my computer so that I can stretch the pictures out and go, but here's your neighbor's kitchen. See how it looks just like yours? That's why this. Because sellers overestimate. It's just human nature. But I spent $5,000 on the epoxy, this and that. You know, I had one set of sellers this summer, really lovely immigrants. And he was insistent he wanted an $800,000 price. And so we're going through the numbers, and I'm like, so tell me about your contractors, because you told me you changed contractors. Because I'm trying to get to the, you know, like, why is he so set on this $800,000 when it's not worth it, right? Well, it turns out he lost $30,000 to one of the contractors who ripped him off. Wait a minute. Oh, so let me just explain. Your buyers don't care if you made a $30,000 mistake, and they're not going to pay you for it. I'm sorry. I really am. That stinks that this contractor took you for a ride, but you can't charge for that. It is a life lesson. And it's no fun to deliver that news, but that's at the bottom of that conversation, right? I had to dig to get that out of him because nobody wants to admit that they've been taken for a ride for $30,000. But that was the truth of it. So I'm like, okay, so do you want it to sit on the market and not sell and actually potentially sell for even less than that? Or do you want to price it appropriately according to these comps and get it sold quickly and get it sold for probably more? Because the longer it sits on the market, the less you're going to get. There will be price reductions because now people think, what's wrong with it? It's what happens. Human nature. It's part of it. So let's see. Well-maintained systems, move-in ready. Anything that is magazine pretty will go fast or faster than others. If it's neutral, people can imagine themselves there. And so people talk about, right, so I sell a lot of empty houses because seniors move into senior living. And so we can do either virtual staging or soft staging. And depending on the price point, that may or may not make a huge difference. But move-in ready, people need to imagine themselves there. So if you're still living in the house while you're selling it, we don't need the 5-foot-tall picture of your daughter in her wedding dress. Because guess what people remember about that room when they walk out of it? Yeah.
You mentioned two kinds of staging. I didn't.
So virtual staging, think about it. Virtual, so 99.9% of your buyers are going to find your house online. And they're going to look at the pictures first. So that's how they're shopping. And they're either going to say yay or nay to even going and looking at it in person based upon how the pictures present, right? Another reason why you want to make sure that you hire the right real estate agent who uses the right photographer. Because I'll look at comps. I mean, I see them all the time. There's agents who go in and take the pictures with their cell phone. It's horrible. It is a complete disservice. And what I always say to people is, when your daughter's getting married, do you hire a professional photographer or do you hand a Polaroid to Uncle Bob? Because that's the difference. The agent using their cell phone is Uncle Bob. And people say to me, I just showed a house this couple days ago, and she said, they just look so much bigger in the pictures. I'm like, yeah, it's called a wide angle lens. And they do that for a reason, because they want to get you in the house. And all of them are going to look bigger in the pictures if they're all professional pictures. But then you get there and you can kind of discern, okay, this room will work for me in certain ways, right? Updated kitchens and bathrooms, we talked a little bit about that. This is one, and I find this, especially with seniors, that cool thing is we're organized, keep all the paperwork, it's all in one file. People love that. Now, it doesn't mean that we need to leave it out with the house, but I can say I have a packet of information. I take it out. If the house is empty, I keep it with me, and then I leave it in the house whenever the house closes. But I do upload documents. If you've got things like maybe you have a receipt from the roof that you just had done 6 months ago, we'll upload that. Here's proof. I'm telling you it's a new roof, but here's the proof of it. So any of that documentation that you've kept can be really valuable in helping sell the house. And it can also answer questions. I've had some cases where people have dementia. And they say, oh, the roof is, I did that 2 years ago. Well, come to find out when I look through your files, guess what? It was actually 5 years ago. We don't want to misrepresent that, right? And so it helps if you've kept that documentation if you or your spouse, one of you, have some kind of memory issue or cognitive decline. So keep a hold of it, keep it organized, and then that can be passed along to the buyer whenever they buy. We kind of did this as we were going, but what questions do you have? Any burning?
Yeah, this probably doesn't relate to it too much, but somewhat. What's the difference between Zillow and Realtor.com? Are they equal?
As far as when you're looking at houses online, yeah, I mean, so when you list with an agent for full service, okay, what that means is the agent puts your listing on the MLS, and I always tell people I'll send a message. It's live. You won't see it for about an hour. And so it takes a little bit. What it is essentially is like a magazine subscription to all of those, Zillow, Homes.com, Realtor. and all that gets distributed, it gets pushed out, and then that gets listed on all their sites. So you're seeing the same listing. They may have a different way of filtering and so forth, but that's what that is. They're owned by different entities.
Do they all come from the MLS?
They come from the MLS, yeah.
Sometimes they come up with different estimates of prices, so is whatever formula they're working unique to the particular.
Yeah, they have their own algorithms, and they can be quite close, and they can be wildly off. Do I look at them? Yeah, I do. I don't necessarily, I still do my own homework, and that's, sometimes it's a discussion. Yeah,
Because
with the
people
sellers.
see what they see, and they
Yeah.
come up with something
Yeah.
different, and you have to
Yeah.
explain why.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Here's the reason that's, it doesn't know that you had a fire, and you've had a total kitchen gut, and you've put all new things in. Yeah, doesn't know that. So it's usually more whenever my comps are under what this estimate is, but it's usually not the other direction. People don't usually question it when they're making more, but again, the human nature. Yeah. Other questions, comments? Anybody here? Are you all planning on selling at some point? No, not back here is a no. Yeah, I see some yeses, several yeses. Okay. And so part of that answer is, all the answers to questions are like, what is your timeline? What does that look like? If you're going to be in the house for another 4 or 5 years, or you're not even sure how long, then do what makes you happy. As long as it's not, I say that, do what makes you happy. It's your house. If it's not neutral, if it's not something that would appeal to a mass market, then it will probably ding you down the road unless you're willing to change it to something more neutral later on. So, if you paint the whole kitchen purple, you will have consequences. There will be people who will say no.
So what is neutral? It's gray out now, and it's more.
White is kind of the new. In fact, I think Sherwin-Williams, or I saw something the other day that they had the white color, which is so funny that it's Snowbound is one that I've used in several listings in the last 6 or 8 months, and that's a Sherwin-Williams color, and it's been well received. So we're back to white. There's some people who love white kitchens. There's some people who don't love white kitchens. They wouldn't have one. So, you've got a mixed bag there. I think white is always going to be neutral as far as a kitchen goes, and you will have a good audience of people who will like that. But if you have orangey brown cabinet, I have one set of clients right now that are like, I don't want that orangey brown. Okay. I can't put you on a search that says no orangey brown cabinets, but you can see that in the pictures and you can rule that out. And so, that's, still seeing some gray. I showed a new house that was built 2024 Saturday, and it had a light gray cabinet and a darker gray island. So that was the neutral in that house. And I said to her, how do you feel about the colors? And she said, I don't mind cool colors. Her car was gray, by the way. So, yeah. No, go ahead.
So if you have stained cabinets, you have wood cabinets that are stained,
Yeah.
and they're kind of like a coffee cabinet. And I know a lot of people have been painting cabinets.
Yeah.
But the problem is, I can paint these cabinets really nice. Like I've seen a lot of nice, like petal blue and like a sage green. But with the kitchen being open to a lot of the rest of the house, it might be better just to keep the house good.
Yeah, and there's some people who really like that coffee color. So I think I'd leave those alone, especially, I don't know what your timeline is, but I'd leave those alone. Unless it just gets to a point where those are, like, all of a sudden, it's kind of like these, the brushed gold I was talking about. If that becomes the thing, that's the thing, and then, gray is out or beige is out or whatever. If it gets to that point, then you might consider it if you're still in the house and you're going to be there another however many years. Pick something you like that's neutral enough. But there's going to be changes, whatever you pick. And cabinets can be done really well or not well. So when you're thinking about painting cabinets, be really careful about what your choice is. There's actually a special paint that's self-leveling. So some painters, if you ask the right question, you get the right painter, they'll know to use the right paint, not just paint it well, but it's a self-leveling that's not going to run or cost. Yeah. So there's a lot to it, and it's an investment. The house I sold with the red, I ended up going back and letting the painters in for an estimate, and the buyers came because the buyer's agent was out of town. So I did it as a favor to let them in. So I just was fly on the wall and listened to the discussion, and they were going to paint the cabinets and take the tile out. So they painted the whole house, and she'd made some really specific wallpaper choices, and so I mean they only kept one wallpapered room that she'd done. So not surprised. I wasn't shocked. I was like, oh yeah, there. That's it. That's how that goes. Other comments, questions? Yeah.
I'm still thinking, of course, I would be thinking not years from now, within the next 6 months.
Okay.
But to change like cabinets in your house, I mean, I know I like wood cabinets.
Yeah.
I don't like painted. So if I went ahead and painted my cabinets, when you're showing the house, people have their own taste.
They do.
So some things just aren't worth.
If you're 6 months out, I wouldn't touch those cabinets, and I would just run the comps according to what is in your area. And likely, if you're in a neighborhood like a neighborhood that has an HOA, for instance, then there's other houses around you that have probably sold and have similar age and styles. And so there's probably comps that we can point to and say, well, this is what this sold for, and someone bought it and liked it at that price. So ideally that you're in that boat, and then we can pull those numbers. If you're a unicorn and you're out, in Henderson or someplace, or out in the country somewhere, then that's a different thing, and it's a little harder to pull the comps, but it's still a discussion to be had. If you're thinking about it and you would like to have a private consultation, I'd be happy to come meet with anyone, and we can go through your house and have that conversation. And I recommend, if you're 6 months from kind of when you think you want to move, this is really the time to have the first conversation about that, because you can start getting things done. And there's it takes a while to get people in to have things done. One of the other things that we can have a discussion about is whether you'd have a pre-inspection. So the house I have going on the market in 2 weeks, we had a pre-inspection on it. The same one where I had to, the sidewalk was kind of messy. And so I could tell, not that the house was in bad shape, but just that she had been overwhelmed by life as a caregiver. And so we had a discussion about a pre-inspection. I said, here's why I would recommend it. And so pre-inspection, you're the one paying. So they're working for you. So you have the inspector come out, and they do an inspection report just like a buyer would who's buying your house. And they send you the inspection report. You can look at that, and you can decide, what do you want to fix? What do you not? What are you going to address? What are you not? And then after all of that's done, which that can take a while, right? So in her case, we met early November. And so she's been working on all of those things, and we're just at the point where the final clean out's going to be done in the next couple of weeks, and I'll get it on the market. And so part of that, what the finding was, she had a lot of moisture in her crawl space. And so I said, I don't think you need to spend the money to encapsulate, but I do think a moisture barrier is going to come up in an inspection. He's red flagged it, and it's an issue. And she had some fungal growth. It wasn't bad, but she ended up paying for a new dehumidifier. And the nice thing is, it's been drying out all this time. And she has a new moisture barrier. So once that's done, the inspector comes back, charges another $100 or so. He does another inspection, and now he removes everything you fixed off that list, so nobody ever sees that it even existed. So then it can be, if you want to release that inspection report, it can be a selling point.
The other thing is, if you release that, the buyer can't come back and say, oh,
You didn't tell me.
this in the inspection, because they put their bid on, and if with this information, And if they didn't read it, well, that's their problem.
Yeah,
They
yeah.
can't say, well, I want money to fix it.
We
Your
did
price should
that
be
up
fixed.
in New York.
Okay.
We had it pre-inspected, and it worked out really well.
Yeah.
But I had my husband at that time who could do a lot of the
Yeah.
things that
Yeah.
talked about. And it really was handy, because when the people who bought our house at their inspector, they found nothing to complain about or want.
Mhm.
But what would the cost be today to have?
To a pre-inspection, so they charge by the square footage, so that's going to be dependent upon each one of you, the square footage of your own home, but around 500-ish, okay, somewhere in that range, and then add in another 100 or so for the re-inspection. But it puts you in the driver's seat because you're in control. You have plenty of time to deal with it. You're not trying to do it in a crunch. You can shop around for prices. It really gives you a whole lot of control over the situation. And the buyer, not only can they read it, they sometimes don't even do their own inspection. They have the right to still do their own inspection, but a lot of times they won't because they feel like, well, you were transparent. You gave this to me. It's from a licensed inspector who would lose his license if he were lying for you. So they accept it as their inspection, and they look at it as a savings because now they don't have to spend the money on having their own inspection done. So there's a lot of good reasons to do it. Now, if we were to go back in time to 2021, 2022, I never recommended you had a pre-inspection for sellers because we'd have 40 buyers lined up and we were selling truly as is, and there were no negotiations for repairs, and the down payments were so high. In some cases, I had some that were 6 figures. This was a non-refundable deposit. It's called a due diligence deposit. I had one case here, it was in Wake Forest, and the buyer agent called me, really not a nice person, unfortunately, and she was very demanding about X, Y, and Z had to be done. And I said, no, I don't know any other way to tell you no. I've told you no before, and here's what I'm going to tell you. Your clients have a 6-figure deposit that's already been deposited. I've already had the discussion with my clients that they will have to claim that as income on their taxes next year if you walk away. So the choice is this. This is what no means to you. The choice is that you walk away and we put it back on the market this weekend, somebody else will buy it, and that $100,000 is gone. Or you can take the answer of no, meaning no, they're not going to fix it. Done. But those days are gone. We aren't there anymore. And there's a lot more power on the side of the buyer. We saw all those numbers at the beginning where things are taking longer to sell and selling for a little less. That means a buyer has more negotiation power, and that means you need to be more prepared as a seller if you want a quick sale for the most money. And that pre-inspection helps you do that.
I think it also gives you a lot more confidence.
I think so too, and you don't get surprised. Because how many of you guys have been in your crawl space in the last year, 2 years? 1, 2 of you. One word, snakes. Don't do it. I don't do it. They live in crawl spaces. Even if they're encapsulated, they're in there. I just don't do it. I mean, it's beautiful. We had ours encapsulated. It's gorgeous if we're a crawl space, but I've seen it. Yeah, I've seen it the one time. It's good enough for me. Yep, there it is. And I look in crawl spaces when I'm with clients, but, I generally don't crawl around. In fact, I was back in October, there was a snake under the moisture barrier with the client. She crawled in there. I did not. I handed her the flashlight and said, I'll be here if you need me. It was live. It was slithering under she got out of there pretty quick. Yeah. She's not too squeamish, so that's one thing about her that's kind of cool. Okay, anything else? Any other questions?
What is the average due diligence? Is it based on the price of the house overall? Is there a
Yep.
percentage of what you should expect?
Yep, and it's a lot lower than it was a few years ago. And it also is dependent upon area. So, and some people will still make an earnest money deposit, depends. Sometimes it's both due diligence and earnest money. So earnest money is held by the closing attorney until close, and you can get it back, unlike due diligence, if you terminate the contract while you're under the due diligence period of time, which is generally about 3 weeks while you're doing your inspections. So you can get that money back. So some people choose to put both down, some choose to just put down due diligence or just earnest money, depends. It's a conversation that we would have, but yeah, probably 1% would be my quick, easy answer, but I mean, everything's relative. Cary's gonna be higher, downtown's gonna be higher, so, you know, depends. Your neighbor could be higher than the neighborhood next to you. Yeah, so it is, again, kind of dependent.
What is the difference between due diligence and earnest?
Due diligence is a North Carolina thing. It was born about 20 years ago, really out of a desire to essentially pay the seller for the time frame where they're not necessarily off market, but showing active under contract. Okay, and so most people will not look at a house that's under contract just because they're second in line automatically. And so originally the due diligence deposits were like $500, $1,000, but in North Carolina that is non-refundable unless there is some kind of deception involved or some kind of information that should have been disclosed up front. Typically, there's a few exceptions, but as a rule of thumb, it is due once you go under contract. The buyer is due to have it to the seller within 24 hours. There's some exceptions to that. Now we've got electronic and weekends and all the things, but you know, back in the day we'd deliver the check to somebody, and still do some, but that's what that is. So it really got blown out of proportion during COVID because it became a big bargaining chip. You can imagine if I had one house that was 38 offers. I was on vacation. And literally coming back in the car, putting things into a spreadsheet as I'm driving back from vacation because all the offers were just coming in one after the other after the other. So the way that people would win that bid is to have a huge chunk in due diligence so that they were reassuring the seller, if I walk away, you get all this money, and then you get to put it back on the market and make more money. So that's when it got way out of control. I had one during that time that the purchase price was the earnest money deposit. The whole thing. There's really not a bigger guarantee that we're going to close this thing, right? That's what they were saying. Yeah. So it was a whole world that doesn't exist anymore. It was just really kind of a crazy time. That was when you were seeing it on the news at night, and they'd say, you know, here's an open house, and people were lined up around the corner. The reason why that happened, it was the realtor's way of working within the rules, because COVID closed us down to 15-minute showings. We could pin down our showings to 15 minutes. They couldn't overlap with anyone else in the house because of COVID, and you would run out of 15-minute slots. The only way you could basically pin that time down was to have an open house, and you would literally have to have two people there. One person's the realtor running the open house, and the other one is the door manager, letting people in the door when the other people went out the back door. And so they were literally doing these, okay, we're going to have X number of minutes in the house, and we're going to look at the outside when we get finished. So they would just do their, 5-10 minutes in the house, and then out the back door. You could go in one door, out the other. It's literally like that. That's why you saw it on TV the way you did, because we were trying to get as many people in the house to get as many offers, because that's our job, right? It was crazy. Yeah, really crazy. In 2020, it started to ramp up towards kind of the end of the year, and I don't remember exactly when it had to do with the interest rates were down to 2%, see? And the sad thing is first-time buyers couldn't even compete. In fact, hardly anybody with a loan could compete because it was all cash. It was all the cash buyers, because that was, you didn't have anything that could go wrong, right, in theory. So you got this big deposit, and then they're going to pay cash, and you don't have to do anything to the house. I mean, who wouldn't sign up for that? It's a great deal for sellers. people who lived in places that are hard to sell, like up against a railroad track, if you didn't move then, you know, that was a good time to get out of there. The problem was, for a lot of people, where do you go? That was the other conversation you would have. Well, I can sell the house. Yeah, I'd sell it in a minute, but where would I go? Yeah, and then you had to kind of deal with that whole thing. So, because there were certainly no contingent offers at all. No one would even look at you. Wasn't even considered. It's crazy. Anything else? Last things? Okay, let me run through a couple of housekeeping things. So, did anyone bring a friend today that is here for the first time? I don't think so, because I think I recognize faces. You guys are missing out. Bring a friend, get an entry into a drawing for a $100 gift card. Downsizers Club is the pink flyer in front of you. This is the schedule for January through June. Back in this room once a month. So if you're interested in coming and talking about how to get rid of all the stuff, this is the place to do it. And we're going to talk about downsizing holiday things this month. So we're going to continue on our community tours of senior living communities. The one that's coming up this month is Thursday, January 22nd. So we've got the bus transportation information in here. I'm still waiting for them to verify. So just know that we may end up carpooling. I can hold 7 in my car. So if not, then they'll send their van. But this is for the Cambridge at Briar Creek. They will provide lunch. And do we not have the time on there? 10 a.m., yeah. 10 a.m. we'll leave from here. And then we'll do a tour of the community and lunch. If you have not RSVP'd, we need that by January 12th. And the one new thing that they'd asked was if you have any food allergies or anything specific that you know, vegan, whatever, let us know, and then we can make that request. Okay? So you can email me or talk to me after, and we'll make sure you get on the list. You've got the postcard, so this is first half of 2026. We'll have a guest speaker at all the rest of the seminars. This is the only one where I'm the main show. So next month is spring cleaning, organizing, and decluttering tips from a pro, and that is Wednesday, February 11th at 10 a.m. right here in this room. And you can watch replays of most of the seminars. The lawyers don't let themselves be recorded. But most of the seminars are recorded and replayed on southernAccentHomes.com. And if you have a chance, if you wouldn't mind filling out the survey, let me know if there's any subjects that you would like to hear about when I start planning for the next 6 months, which will be later probably in the spring. I take a look at these to see if there's anybody I can plug in for some of the seminars. If you would like to receive the monthly newsletter and you're not already receiving that, there's a copy over on the sign-in table. Those are mailed out once a month, or you can get email, so you can specify that. So if you want to receive that, let me know. And if you have any questions about selling your house, the price of your house, what to do, you can make a note on there, let me know, and I'll be happy to give you a call. I am going to be out of town. I'm leaving on Friday, somewhere sunny, and I'll be back on the 18th. So if I don't call you right away, just know that I've got that. Yeah, I'm going to be away for a little bit. So any last thoughts? Thank you all so much. Really good questions today. Appreciate it. Have a great day and a great month.